ridiculous.
How will you respond if the ceasefire is violated?
I didn't like plenty of things I saw yesterday. I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload. And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong. But in all fairness, Israel unloaded a lot. And now I hear Israel just went out because they felt it was violated by one rocket that didn't land anywhere. That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either. All I do is play both sides. I'm going now, as you know, to NATO. Some of you are going with me, and I think it's going to be successful. We'll see. I'll let you know.
Are you going to see the agreement? It's a new dawn in the Middle East, thanks to the agreement you managed to achieve. What are your future plans for the region, for Saudi Arabia, Israel, Gaza, the hostages?
Look, you're asking me about women in the Middle East. It's getting a lot better. Things are happening at a high level. As you know, Saudi Arabia's done a really good job. It's coming out far faster than I thought. So we're very happy about what's happening with women in the Middle East.
No, I'm talking about a new dawn in the Middle East that you managed to achieve last night.
Yeah.
The region is going to a new place with this agreement. Can you tell us what's your future plans for Gaza, for the hostages?
Yeah. It's a new dawn. I appreciate the question. You're very nice. Who are you?
Thank you. I'm Krause from Israeli Channel 13 News.
Well, we have Israel calm down because they went on a mission this morning. I got to get Israel to calm down now.
Did you get to speak with the Prime Minister? Did you talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu last night?
I speak to everybody.
You urge both sides not to violate the ceasefire, but reports coming from the region suggest that the sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I don't think I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it, okay?
Have you spoken to him this morning? How confident are you that Iran is completely demolished?
I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. And you know, the fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing? They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated, and the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean.
You don't believe that Iran can rebuild its nuclear program?
No, Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers.
Israel says that they violated the peace agreement.
You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace.
Israel says that Iran violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Do you have to respond to Iran on this?
Well, there we have it, the remarks of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to US media as he walks there to Marine One, the helicopter that transports the United States President. Joining myself and Emily Carver in the studio is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a pretty extraordinary state of affairs.
Well, it is extraordinary, and there is an explicit warning to Israel. President Trump has said in terms, Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it's a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. Right, so that is in response to the fact that as we speak, Israeli warplanes are flying over southwestern Syria, heading for Iran in what the Israeli Defence Minister said will be a very significant response targeting Iranian regime infrastructure within Tehran in response to what was a ballistic missile that was fired from Iran this morning after that ceasefire took hold. But President Trump saying, look, the response from Israel is just not justified. This was one ballistic missile that, according to President Trump there, was either misfired or fired in error and was quickly taken out by the defence systems of Israel and does not warrant what will be, he says, a violation of this ceasefire. So absolutely no doubt about this. He said it there. He's going to board Air Force One now, and clearly he will be hammering home that message to Benjamin Netanyahu to get that message through to those pilots to turn around. It would be very interesting to see whether Israel is willing to completely defy what Donald Trump is trying to direct them to do.
Yeah,
he couldn't be clearer.
Donald Trump desperately trying to keep a lid on this.
Yes, there's no doubt, because I think he was understandably very pleased with the fact that he could bring the sides together to agree a ceasefire. And he put out, of course, on Truth Social, his congratulations to everyone concerned, and that, you know, this was, as far as he was concerned, a major triumph. So, but it was very fragile, clearly.
I guess it's easy for Donald Trump to say, well, it's not easy for Donald Trump to say, but he can say it, but it's Israel who's been targeted by Iran directly. So presumably they'll have a different take on this entirely.
Yes, indeed. I mean, listen, these issues around the Middle East are never, ever straightforward. And we know that Donald Trump ran for the presidency on both occasions, saying that he was never for a forever war. He didn't want to get caught up in the mess that are these wars in the Middle East or elsewhere. We see it, of course, now in Ukraine as well. He's been very reluctant to go down that particular path, and that's why I think there are many people within his own base very alarmed at the decision by Donald Trump to enter this war in the first place by bombing these nuclear installations. I mean, he has been very quick to say that that was a one-off endeavour to ensure that those nuclear facilities were dismantled, were destroyed, that that capability was no longer there for Iran to build a nuclear bomb. Mission accomplished as far as he was concerned. But of course, then he wanted to see Israel get on board with that, because the very reason that Israel said it had gone into Iran in the first place was to stop it getting a nuclear bomb. Now, it looks as though in the last couple of days, the mission for Israel has changed a bit. They've been going over going after regime targets. So the kind of apparatus that is responsible for state security, for the forces that are often employed to suppress the local population when they rise up against the Iranian regime. So a real sort of indication, perhaps, that Israel was minded to try to do all that it could to destabilise the Iranian regime. That's not what Donald Trump was looking for. And that's why he's clearly been able, or certainly as of early this morning, been able to persuade the two sides that enough is enough for now, that a ceasefire should be agreed to and they should step back from the brink. But we've had it violated so very quickly after that ceasefire came in.
And there is so much riding on this. This morning we saw oil prices actually fall to lower than they were before this crisis. Donald Trump had been posting on Truth Social saying, drill, baby, drill, everyone keep these oil prices down. It seemed like he was on for not just a sort of military diplomatic success, but an economic success too. And this is all now in severe jeopardy. As we speak, these planes flying over Syria, perhaps halfway between Israel and Iran, and yet no indication that the Israelis are turning these planes back, no indication that actually we've had any sort of public statement from Benjamin Netanyahu since we heard those words from Donald Trump. This is a moment of severe jeopardy.
Yeah, I mean, let's see if the word gets through. We simply don't know whether the planes will be turned back or not. They might well be. Benjamin Netanyahu might decide, given you couldn't get a more explicit and direct instruction, demand from the President of the United States, Israel's biggest ally and backer, to now back off and turn those planes around. If Benjamin Netanyahu decides to go ahead in his own national interest and on the belief of his war cabinet that this is the step they've got to take, then you've got to realise that, you know, in doing that, you are going to suffer really the ire of your biggest supporter and sponsor.
And Mark, do we have an idea on who's right in terms of Iran's violation of the ceasefire? Donald Trump saying it was a mistake or an error. Perhaps only one missile doesn't warrant this type of response. The IDF saying it's a severe violation of the ceasefire and therefore they must respond with force. Is the truth somewhere in the middle?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, just for a second, I've been distracted by the Prime Minister, who has given a response in relation to the apparent violation of the ceasefire. And he has said, well, I want the ceasefire to continue, and therefore, obviously, the sooner we get back to that, the better. And that's the message that I'm discussing with other leaders today. We need to get back to that ceasefire, which is consistent with what I've been saying about de-escalation for quite some time. I should just say that I exchanged messages with the Emir of Qatar yesterday as well. In relation to the attack yesterday. But whatever Sir Keir Starmer says, and whether he's speaking to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis, they're far, far less likely to listen to anything the UK government has to say and what Sir Keir Starmer has to say, particularly in light of a cooling off of relationships between the UK and the Israelis in recent weeks, than they will be for this man on board Air Force One now, as this aircraft turns around, taxis with a view to taking off, heading for the Netherlands for that important NATO meeting. But also, without a doubt, we will have a news conference and words from Donald Trump, at which he will be even more fulsome than he has been there. And we'll know, of course, by the time that Donald Trump lands, whether Israel, whether Benjamin Netanyahu has listened to that warning, to that demand from the US president to turn those planes around and not drop those bombs.
What a significant moment for this all to be happening, of course, as Trump is heading to that NATO meeting. We can just see, for those listening on the radio, Air Force One beginning its taxi, as Mark was saying, to take off there just outside Washington, D.C. for that flight over the Atlantic. And to be honest, what could happen over that 7-hour flight, 8-hour flight, is really up in the air as that plane will be. It could be an entirely different situation in the Middle East by the time the President of the United States lands at that NATO headquarters, compared to what we are now experiencing while he is there for these few final seconds on the ground there in the United States of America.
Do you want an indication of just how clearly exasperated Donald Trump is? Yeah. Transcription of something that he said, I missed it actually on what has been played back here. But he said, speaking about Iran and Israel, they've been fighting for so long and so hard that they don't know what the F they're doing. You understand that? So an expletive. He's so exasperated, clearly, at what's going on, so angry that the ceasefire that he's brokered has been broken so very quickly. Of course, it's embarrassing for him as well, given how fulsome he was in his own, praising his own efforts on his social media accounts.
And he wants
just
to be
hours earlier.
That's what he wants his legacy, or at least part of his legacy to be, is peacemaker.
Yeah.
Whether it's between Ukraine, Russia, whether it's between Israel, Palestine, and now Iran. That's what he wants. And this is yet another obstacle. And will he be able to control the Israeli Defense Forces? That's the big question right now.
Well, Donald Trump is a shoot from the hip kind of a guy in terms of the rhetoric that you get from him. But, he's learning a lesson about affairs in the Middle East. These wars have been raging for thousands of years in the Middle East. And diplomacy, is exasperating as well, because it is often at such a glacial pace in the way in which inroads are made. He wants, and understandably, he wants things done and done quickly, and he wants an end to the fighting now. But he is finding out that these, old enemies take an awful lot of convincing to actually just step back from the brink, as we see now Air Force One picking up speed, heading down this runway to head off to Europe for that vital NATO summit.
And we will try and get that replay of the president's extraordinary outburst ready for you. Of course, this is daytime television. We will bleep the expletive that he used.
I hope so.
But this is, to all intents and purposes, I think the first time the President of the United States has said a swear word like that in front of the world's media. Lots of reports that Trump has been perhaps quite coarse in private, but in public, in front of the assembled press, what a moment. And as you say, Mark, it speaks to the mind of the man right now. This is clearly a very angry United States president on board that plane as it takes off for the Netherlands.
Yeah, I wonder what they will be thinking in Tehran about this, because he was clear that it was Israel that he really singled out in terms of expressing great anger and disappointment. He said, of course, both sides, Iran, he was disappointed with, Israel he was disappointed with, but particularly, he said, Israel unloading so soon after this ceasefire and making that very explicit warning. Now, he said, with regard to that ballistic missile, I think what amounts to the fact that it was his belief that it was either a misfire or some kind of a mistake, that ballistic missile came over from Iran in the first place, and said, again in terms, it has been quickly dealt with. It posed no threat. It was taken out of the skies by Israel's defences. What is happening now seems completely unwarranted in terms of the level of the response that Israel is about to embark on.
But it may be that the Israelis, they're very much at the coalface, aren't they, of the Iranian threat in a way that the rest of the West isn't. They've got Hezbollah, they've got Hamas, all sponsored and paid for by the Iranian regime. You can see why they may, in Trump's words, overreact.
Yes, indeed. We should say on the sort of reports that both Israel and Iran violated the ceasefire. Again, this is just kind of taking some of the quotes from his impromptu chat to the press there as he's about to board Marine One for then Air Force One. He said, I'm not sure they did it intentionally, Iran and Israel. They couldn't rein people back. He said, I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. As soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it. So clearly, once he's on Air Force One, and now it's taken off, once he's in the position to do, once they have climbed and they've reached the point where they've levelled off, he'll be straight on the phone, it seems, to Israel.